Morgan Ellis was always the quiet one in the building, kept to herself, never raised her voice, and never left a mess. Tyler Hartley, her downstairs neighbor, was the opposite. Loud, charming, and always surrounded by people. No one could have predicted that their lives would violently collide one cold October night. But when police opened Morgan S. freezer and found Tyler S. dismembered body packed between frozen vegetables, the quiet woman in 3B became the center of a mystery far darker than anyone imagined. What no one knew then was that Morgan wasn't the only one hiding something, and she definitely wasn't working alone. In a quiet suburb just outside Cleveland, Ohio, there was an apartment building known for its silence, the kind of place where neighbors nodded politely but never asked questions. Everyone liked it that way. No one came in unless they belonged. No one left in a hurry. Among the dozens of tenants was a woman who most people barely noticed, Morgan Ellis. She lived alone in Unit 3B, a corner apartment on the 3rd floor. The blinds were always closed, the lights dim, and not once did anyone hear a television or music coming from her space. The only sound she ever made was the occasional creak of the floorboards when she walked from one side of the apartment to the other at night. She looked ordinary, medium height, brown hair usually tied in a loose bun, and pale skin that seemed untouched by sunlight. She never wore anything brighter than gray. Her presence was like background noise, always there, but never acknowledged. No one ever saw her bring guests home. No one ever saw her leave for work. She told the landlord she was a freelance data analyst, said she worked from home. But there were no deliveries of equipment or signs of a home office. Just one consistent Wednesday night drop-off from the same delivery man, always carrying an unmarked brown box. He never stayed long, in and out within minutes. There were subtle things about her that felt off to some of the tenants, but no one could quite put their finger on it. Her apartment always smelled like bleach, even in the hallway. The scent clung to the air, mixing awkwardly with the musk of old carpeting and the faint scent of mildew that all buildings this age eventually carried. People assumed she was just a clean freak. After all, she seemed polite. Reserved, yes, but not rude. She smiled when spoken to, held the door for older tenants, signed for packages that weren't hers, and delivered them to the right doors without being asked. Still, there was a discomfort she left behind, like walking into a room that had just been vacated and still carried the warmth of someone you didn't expect. Things started to change when Tyler Henson moved into Unit 2B, directly beneath her. He was everything Morgan wasn't: loud, social, always hosting people. His voice carried up through the floorboards when he played video games late at night, or had friends over for poker. He had a laugh that echoed, booming and raw, as if he wanted the entire world to know he was there. Some found him annoying, others found him magnetic. Morgan didn't react at all. She never complained, never left a note. But those who lived nearby noticed something else. She stopped signing for packages, stopped saying hello. She moved through the building even quieter than before, like she was trying not to be seen. Tyler had a different woman over almost every week. Blonde, brunette, tall, short. None stayed long, and none came back twice. Some neighbors whispered about what he did for money. He drove a different car every month, wore flashy watches, and once left a wad of $100 bills on his dashboard like it was nothing. A rumor started that he was involved in something illegal, maybe drugs, maybe worse. But no one confronted him. He was friendly, unpredictable, and just intimidating enough to make people look the other way. Over time, a strange pattern emerged. The hallway cameras, meant to deter package theft, started recording unusual activity on the third floor. Around 2 a.m. every Friday morning, someone, presumed to be Morgan, would open her door, peek into the hallway, and leave a small plastic bag on the floor just outside. An hour later, it would be gone. No one ever saw who took it. The maintenance man, an older veteran named Daryl, noticed Morgan's behavior first. He said she always kept her kitchen window cracked open, no matter the weather. He once knocked on her door to let her know water had leaked into the apartment below hers. She didn't answer for 5 minutes. When she did, she seemed dazed. Her pupils were dilated, and her voice flat. She said everything was fine. Daryl believed her, but not really. Something about the interaction lingered in his mind for weeks. Then came the night of the power outage. A fuse blew around midnight, knocking out electricity to half the building. While others stepped into the hallway with flashlights, annoyed and confused, Morgan never came out. Daryl had to enter the building's utility room to reset the breaker. While doing so, he heard something from the vent above him. Something like dragging, slow and heavy. When he checked the unit numbers, he realized the vent was just below Morgan's floor. He said nothing, chalked it up to old pipes or perhaps his imagination. But it didn't stop there. 2 nights later, a neighbor walking her dog in the alley behind the building found a smear of something dark on the concrete near the dumpster. It looked like blood, but there was no body, no evidence of a struggle. Just the stain and a crumpled paper napkin with a phone number scribbled on it. The handwriting was neat and small. Police were called, but the stain had been washed away by rain before they arrived. The napkin was gone too, taken by someone before they could investigate further. Morgan, as always, said nothing. But inside her apartment, something had shifted. In the bottom drawer of her kitchen cabinet, hidden beneath rolls of plastic wrap and aluminum foil, she had begun collecting something new. Items that didn't belong to her. A gold bracelet, a half-empty bottle of cologne, a cracked pair of sunglasses, each one meticulously labeled with a date and time, stored in small Ziploc bags. None of it made sense yet, but something was building. And Morgan, always so quiet, was starting to prepare for something no one saw coming. The first package arrived on a Thursday morning, left outside Morgan's door in an unmarked brown envelope. It wasn't addressed to anyone, had no postage, and bore no company label. Just a thin strip of tape sealing it shut. She opened it slowly, cautiously, as if something inside might bite. What she found was a man's wristwatch. It was heavy, silver, with a cracked face and worn leather strap. The hands were frozen at 3:17. She didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain. She turned it over in her palm several times, then slid it into a drawer beneath her sink, and forgot about it, at least for a while. A week later, another package came. This time it was a box, roughly the size of a shoebox, covered in black matte paper, and sealed so tightly it took her 10 minutes with a kitchen knife to get it open. Inside were a pair of black leather gloves. Men's gloves, expensive ones, the kind Tyler might wear. But there was no note, no explanation, just the gloves, pressed together like hands in prayer, resting atop a layer of tissue paper. Morgan didn't throw them away. She didn't even question where they'd come from. She placed them next to the wristwatch and sat in silence for a long time, her hands in her lap, her mind somewhere else entirely. Days passed. Nothing happened. Then came the photograph. It arrived tucked inside her mailbox, not a package this time, just a single envelope without postage, clearly hand-delivered. When she opened it, her breath caught. The photo was grainy and poorly lit, but unmistakable. It was Tyler, standing in the parking lot out front, wearing his usual smug expression, holding a takeaway coffee cup in one hand, his phone in the other. The timestamp in the corner said 4:39 a.m. It had been taken from an angle above, probably from a third-floor window, probably from her own apartment. That was the first time fear crept under her skin, like a slow-moving toxin. She had no security camera. She hadn't taken that photo. She hadn't even been awake at 4:39 that morning. Someone had watched him. And more importantly, someone had accessed her mailbox to deliver proof of it. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't call the police. She didn't confront Tyler. Instead, she went to her closet and pulled out a battered, spiral-bound notebook she kept hidden behind a removable wall panel. She wrote down the date, time, and a description of the package, just like she had with the wristwatch and the gloves. She created a new section labeled Photo and added a brief entry. Taken from my angle, not by me. Who else sees what I see? That night, she started locking her bedroom door for the first time. She slid a chair beneath the handle and slept with a long, serrated kitchen knife tucked under the pillow. The packages continued. One week she received a small metal key. No note, no tag. It didn't fit any locks in her apartment or the building. Another time, it was a folded napkin with the name Ty written in smudged ink, tucked inside a plastic sandwich bag. Each new item went into the same drawer. She never spoke of them, never asked neighbors if they had seen anything. She simply observed, documented, and waited. Then, on a rainy Tuesday night, she saw something that made everything worse. Tyler stood outside the building arguing with someone in a black SUV. Morgan had pulled back her curtain just slightly, the way she always did when the rain helped mask her movements. The SUV's engine was running, and its headlights cast a sharp glare against Tyler's face. He was angry. His gestures were wild, aggressive. He pointed at the driver, shouted something Morgan couldn't hear. The driver never got out. After a few minutes, the vehicle sped off, tires screeching as it turned the corner. Tyler stood alone in the rain for a long moment before he punched the hood of a nearby car and stormed back inside. That same night, another package appeared on Morgan's doormat. No envelope this time, just a single bullet wrapped in wax paper. She held it between her fingers and felt its weight. It was real, heavy and cold. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She added it to her drawer, documented it, and placed it between the gloves and the photograph. After that, she started sleeping in shifts, 2 hours at a time, rotating between the couch and the floor near the window. She kept all the lights off, even when she was awake, and began taping over the peephole in her door. At night, she listened. She became a creature of silence and tension, breathing in shallow rhythms, her ears alert to every sound in the building. The elevator's groan, the creak of stairwell doors, the occasional drunken laughter coming from Tyler's apartment below. Something wasn't right. Not just about Tyler, not just about the packages. Something much deeper, something layered. And she knew, somehow, that it wasn't over. Because when she finally went back to her notebook to reread her entries, she discovered something chilling. There was a new page she didn't remember writing. It was dated 2 weeks into the future, and it read, "He will come upstairs. He will ask for help. I will feel him harden in my hand, and I will go too far." The silence inside Morgan's apartment grew thicker with each passing day. The packages had stopped, but the tension had not. Something felt unfinished, like a string being slowly pulled tighter from the other end. She lived in a state of unspoken waiting, pacing her apartment in long measured loops. Her world had shrunk to the perimeter of 3B, window, kitchen, drawer, bed, again and again. She rarely ate, rarely slept. And when she did, it was always with one eye open, a knife tucked tightly into her fist beneath the blankets. Downstairs, Tyler continued his routines as if nothing had changed. Music drifted up through the floors. Laughter spilled from his door late into the night. Cars came and went at strange hours, headlights flashing across the front windows. Morgan stopped going into the hallway unless absolutely necessary. She didn't check her mailbox anymore. She unplugged her doorbell. Something inside her had calcified. Then one morning, she noticed a smell. Faint at first, barely noticeable over the ever-present chemical scent of bleach she used daily to scrub her counters, her walls, her bathroom tiles. But this new odor was different. Mustier, sharper. It clung to the air like an infection. She tracked it to her freezer. It had begun humming louder than usual, almost groaning. When she opened it, she found nothing out of place. Bags of frozen vegetables, ice trays, vacuum-sealed meats. Still, the smell seemed to gather around the seal, as if it were bleeding from the very edges of the door. She didn't open it again that day. The following morning, the maintenance man, Daryl, came by to inspect a complaint from the tenant below her. A leak in the ceiling. Tyler's ceiling. Daryl knocked once. Morgan waited, silent behind the door. He knocked again, harder this time. Then he called out, his voice cautious, apologetic. She opened the door halfway and told him to come back later. She blamed a spilled drink, said she was handling it, said she was sorry. He left, but not before looking past her into the dark hallway of her apartment. He asked if her lights were out. She said she liked the dark. When she closed the door again, she bolted it 3 times. That night, the hallway camera caught footage of someone wheeling a suitcase down the corridor. The image was blurry, the figure unidentifiable. No neighbors reported traveling. No one admitted to seeing or hearing anything unusual. The building's manager checked the timestamp. It was just after 3 a.m. The suitcase was never seen again. 2 days later, Tyler was reported missing. It was the woman from 1A, a young tenant who had once dated him briefly, who made the call. She said she hadn't seen him in over a week and that he'd missed 2 rent payments. That his phone went straight to voicemail. That his car hadn't moved from its spot in days. Police arrived the next morning. They spoke to residents, knocked on doors. When they reached Morgan's, she answered calmly, her face blank, her voice level. She said she hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. Said she mostly kept to herself. Said she'd been sick and hadn't left the apartment much. They thanked her and moved on. But they came back later that afternoon, after checking building security logs and noticing that Morgan was the last person to receive a delivery before Tyler vanished. They asked to come in. She agreed. Her apartment was spotless. Not just clean, but aggressively sterile. The kind of clean that makes people uncomfortable. White walls, bare shelves. Nothing personal, no framed photos, no soft textures. Every surface gleamed, Every drawer was organized with military precision, except one, the freezer. It was sealed shut with layers of duct tape. One officer asked about it. Morgan said it was broken, that it leaked when it ran. She said she was waiting for maintenance to fix it. The officer asked to open it. She hesitated, then nodded. They cut the tape slowly, carefully. Morgan didn't move. When they pulled the door open, the stench hit first. Inside were 5 large trash bags, carefully packed and frozen solid. Beneath them, other items. Bags of frozen peas, microwave dinners, ice packs, arranged as if nothing was unusual. The officers didn't say anything at first. They just looked at each other. Then they reached for the bags. When they unsealed the first one, what they found was undeniable. A man's arm, tattooed, cold and rigid with freezer burn. The same tattoo several neighbors had seen on Tyler's forearm when he wore short sleeves. Morgan didn't run. She didn't scream. She walked to her kitchen table, pulled out her notebook, and handed it over to the officers without a word. Inside, every item from the packages had been recorded. Descriptions, dates, theories. The last page was a handwritten note. I felt him harden in my hand. I should have let go, but I didn't. When they arrested her, she didn't resist. She asked only one question. Did you check the closet? They hadn't. But when they did, they found a hollowed-out section behind the drywall, filled with more objects, more bags, more trophies, and a photograph of Tyler, smiling, taken from a window that faced her own. Someone else had taken it, and now they had no idea who. Morgan's arrest sent a ripple of shock through the building. The residents, once comfortably detached from one another, now whispered in huddles by the mailboxes and avoided eye contact in the hallways. Some claimed they always suspected something was off. Others said she had seemed harmless. The news vans arrived quickly after the story broke. A body discovered in a woman's freezer. The victim, a well-known tenant with a string of mysterious dealings. Reporters crowded the sidewalks, pressing microphones at anyone who opened the front door, trying to piece together the narrative. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that the story didn't begin or end with Morgan Ellis. At the police station, investigators struggled to pull clear answers from her. She spoke plainly, unemotionally, answering their questions with unsettling calm. She admitted that the body in the freezer was Tyler's. She said he came to her apartment one night, angry, sweating, wild-eyed. He had accused her of watching him, of knowing something she shouldn't. She claimed he lunged at her, said she grabbed something, a paperweight, she thought, and swung blindly. Said she didn't mean to kill him, said she panicked. But the evidence told a different story. Tyler's injuries didn't match her version. There were no signs of blunt force trauma on the skull. Instead, he had been drugged, heavily, and then suffocated. The marks on his neck were faint, precise, no struggle, no defensive wounds. It was clean, intentional. Then there were the packages. Investigators found them in her drawer, catalogued and labeled with notes. The gloves, the bullet, the wristwatch. None of them could be definitively tied to Tyler. None had fingerprints, but each item suggested planning, forethought, a slow build-up to something more than an accident. The most unsettling clue was the notebook, not just the contents, but the handwriting itself. Analysts noted that some entries varied subtly in style. Certain letters curved differently, certain lines of pressure were inconsistent. almost as if more than one person had written in it. That theory gained traction when investigators examined her closet. Behind the drywall, they found not just trophies, but entire folders. Names, dates, photographs, handwritten observations, some connected to Tyler, others linked to people no one could identify. One folder contained detailed notes about an unnamed man with a limp who delivered boxes every Wednesday. Another referenced a red-haired woman who lived across the alley and always left her bathroom light on past midnight. Some of these individuals existed, others didn't. One file, dated over a year earlier, included photos of yet another missing person, a man named Vincent Hale, a tech consultant who had vanished from a nearby suburb. His disappearance had never been solved. Inside the file were screenshots of his social media, lists of items he'd purchased online, and a single Ziploc bag containing a hotel room keycard with dried blood around the edge. The deeper they dug, the less clear things became. Morgan refused to say whether the notes were hers. She neither confirmed nor denied her connection to the other missing persons. When pressed about Vincent, she simply stared across the table in silence. She didn't blink. She didn't fidget. It was as if she was waiting for something, or someone. Meanwhile, the forensic team discovered something odd in her apartment's electrical setup. A series of hidden cameras had been installed inside the vents and behind the air conditioning unit. Not by Morgan, but by someone else. The equipment was sophisticated, remote access enabled, battery-backed, and difficult to detect. One camera had been wired directly into a hallway light fixture. This suggested someone had been watching her. One image recovered from the hidden storage showed Morgan sleeping on the floor, knife clutched tightly in her hand. The image was time-stamped 3 weeks before Tyler's death. Someone had taken the photo while she slept. Someone had been inside. It became clear that Morgan might not have been the predator at all times. She may have been both predator and prey, caught in something far larger than she understood. Or maybe she knew everything and had simply orchestrated the confusion as a shield. When detectives returned to the apartment building to question other tenants again, they discovered that one man, Daryl, the maintenance worker, had vanished. His truck was gone. His unit empty. He had cleared out overnight. No forwarding address. No trace. Inside his apartment, they found something chilling. A notebook, nearly identical to Morgan's. But his entries were older, messier, obsessive. He had tracked her movements for over 2 years. Times she left the apartment, what she wore, what groceries she bought. He had recorded her reactions to the packages. She doesn't open right away, watches them for hours first, and noted the days she didn't sleep. In one entry, dated 3 months prior to Tyler's death, he wrote, "She's beginning to understand. Soon she'll act, but I have to be close when it happens. Close enough to clean it up." It turned everything on its head. Morgan wasn't just a woman with secrets. She was someone who had been chosen, watched, nudged, possibly manipulated into violence. But by whom? And why? Back in her holding cell, she began refusing meals. She stopped speaking altogether. She would only sit in the corner, eyes on the wall, lips moving without sound. A guard overheard her whisper something one night, barely audible. "I wasn't supposed to remember." The investigation no longer had a single suspect. It had fractured into something more disturbing, a pattern of quiet disappearances, subtle manipulations, and a woman who might have been both puppet and puppeteer. And the only person who could explain it all had just vanished into the night. The court ordered Morgan to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation before any official trial could begin. The experts who met with her over the next several weeks couldn't reach a clear consensus. Some diagnosed her with dissociative identity disorder. Others leaned toward paranoid schizophrenia. A few suspected she was faking it all. One forensic psychologist described her behavior as organized dissociation, as though she was deliberately folding her identity into something fractured to hide from the truth. Morgan had stopped speaking almost entirely. When she did, it was cryptic, fragmented. She would stare at corners of the room and talk about shadows moving on their own, about windows that never reflected properly, about a man she referred to only as the Echo. She refused to say what happened the night Tyler died, or why she had preserved his body with such meticulous care. She never spoke about Daryl. In fact, when shown a photo of him, she claimed not to recognize him at all. The investigators kept digging. The discovery of Daryl's notebook had opened a tunnel of possibilities none of them wanted to explore. He had followed not just Morgan, but others. Names mentioned in his entries led to open cases across 3 counties. Missing persons, unexplained deaths, suicides that never quite made sense. The records showed Daryl had worked at multiple buildings over the past decade. In every location, at least one tenant had disappeared without explanation. Always someone solitary, vulnerable, isolated. It became clear. Daryl hadn't just been watching Morgan. He had been cultivating her. Somehow he had turned her into something she wasn't, or something she had been trying not to become. His notes referenced breaking points, environmental pressure, and emotional containment failures. One page simply read, "She's almost ready. It's like watching a bird build its own cage." The files in Morgan's apartment, the hidden wall compartments, the carefully preserved packages. They hadn't just been trophies. They were artifacts from a controlled experiment, a psychological crucible designed to push her past a threshold. She had been the subject. Tyler had likely been the final variable. In one particularly haunting entry, Daryl had written, "When she feels him harden in her hand, the switch will flip. She'll know what she is, but it has to feel like her choice." What exactly she had done, and how much of it was influenced, remained uncertain. But one thing became terrifyingly clear. She had been manipulated to kill. Even worse, Daryl had vanished without a trace. He hadn't used credit cards or his ID since the night he disappeared. His apartment had been wiped clean. The cameras he installed were sophisticated and custom-made. No serial numbers. His prints were wiped from every surface. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the air, leaving behind only his observations and a woman unraveling under the weight of what had been done to her. Months passed. The media turned the case into a nationwide obsession. True crime podcasts speculated endlessly. YouTubers pored over every detail, analyzing footage from Morgan's building, searching for glimpses of the mysterious maintenance man, theorizing about a larger network of similar psychological manipulators. Some believed Morgan was part of a cult. Others thought she had invented Daryl as a way to cope with what she had done. But the evidence was too specific, too clean, too intentional to ignore. And then came the final twist. 6 months after Morgan's arrest, a storage unit in a nearby town was auctioned off due to unpaid fees. Inside were dozens of boxes labeled with building names and addresses. Among them, a box labeled Ellis, Phase 4. Inside were hundreds of photographs of Morgan spanning years, from her college graduation to grainy shots of her walking to the grocery store, sitting at cafes, staring out windows. There were typed pages, journal entries not written by her but about her. Emotional state logs, notes on posture, eye movement, sleeping patterns, diagrams of her apartment, floor plans. In one file, there was a sheet titled Trigger Event Simulation Model. At the bottom, a sentence. Initiation complete. Subject prepared. Outcome pending. This wasn't random. This wasn't just one man's obsession. It was something else. Bigger. Designed. No one could explain it. Morgan remained in psychiatric custody. She would stare out the small window of her room each day and whisper to herself. Nurses reported that sometimes, in the middle of the night, she would sit up suddenly and smile. Not a kind smile, a knowing one. The kind that made people feel cold. One nurse, during a routine check, found a piece of torn paper hidden in Morgan's mattress. On it were the words, "I was never alone. You just didn't see him standing behind you." They reviewed the surveillance footage again. Nothing. No one had come near her cell. No one had slipped her a note. The handwriting didn't match hers. It matched Daryl's. But Daryl was gone. Or maybe he wasn't. Some officers believed he was still out there, watching another person, preparing another subject. Or perhaps he was dead, his final work completed. Others began to believe that Morgan had absorbed his methods, taken them on like a second skin. One detective put it best. There are crimes that make you question morality. Then there are crimes that make you question reality. This was the second kind. As time passed, the frenzy faded. People moved on. But Morgan stayed in that room, waiting, because the final line in her notebook had never been explained. He will return, not to finish me, to finish what we started. And everyone knew deep down that this story wasn't over. It had only begun.